Dun, 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 dun.
Hello,
Dun,
everybody,
dun,
and
dun.
welcome to Week
Dun, dun,
11
dun, dun,
rankings for the Talk-On
dun,
show. I don't know what number episode this is, but
dun,
just know
dun,
it's
dun,
Week
dun,
11. We
dun,
got a
dun,
lot in store
dun,
for you.
dun,
Well, not a lot, but we got a couple things in store for you today. We got our usual top 15, Talk-On's top 15, and then we're starting this week our playoff projections. So with me today is my co-host. I actually already forgot what your name, Stinky Pits. Wonderful name, aka Cam, and then you have me, Chase, or and aka Google me, Signetti, because I win.
Yes, sir. At
So
least
the
one of
playoff.
our name references do the game.
So the playoff. We'll go ahead and start by saying the playoff predictions today are going to be based on what we think the committee, not what we think is right and what we think should be the playoff projections, but what we think is
It
actually
won't be an
going to be
objectively
what's going to
correct
happen.
Talk-Ons projection. Yeah.
Because it'll be objectively correct based off the playoff committee's objective wrongness. So we're going to be correctly guessing their wrongness. So
Yes. We will be updating our official, objectively correct Talk-On's top 15 today, according to where things stand in week 11. Um, and yes, this is our first episode of our playoff projections. We will be doing the Talk-On's 12-team field playoff projections. We will start doing that today, and that will be like our reactions episode from here on out. It will be updating the top 15 and the playoff projection from there. So also, I hope you guys enjoyed that custom intro for all of you uh, football video game fans out there. You may have recognized that song. It's a really real throwback right there. But
it's the deep cut.
that's our sport casting song we're using today as our intro. A
Yep.
little bit of a deep cut from EA Sports.
All the way back in 04, Madden 2004. Objectively, the best Madden game. I'm sure I
Objectively.
just pissed off a lot of people, but 07, yeah, sure, that can be second.
Yeah, that can be second. But okay, so I mean, a lot has been happening in the world of college football. Um, a lot of teams that, well, we kind of knew weren't all that great have been losing, but not so much losing to teams that we thought they would. A lot of unexpected losses, um,
Um,
and a lot of unexpected intensity of losses for some teams, like Stinky Pittsburgh,
Stinky
who,
Pittsburgh
yeah,
and Clemson, who made me very angry this weekend.
Clemson
So,
betrayed us. They betrayed our objectively correctness, and Iowa State just proved us right, more or less. I didn't think they'd lose to who they lost to, but just drives the point further home. Kansas State losing to Houston, though, that's crazy. I did not think that was going to happen.
yeah. Also, isn't that like the first time Louisville's ever beat Clemson? Something like that.
Is it? Was this a historical win for
I think it
Louisville?
might have been, which is just another thing to check off on this
This
season in
crazy
crazy
season,
things.
dude. It's
So,
amazing. Amazing season
so
so far.
I love it just because as being a Georgia fan, the SEC is wide open right now. I mean, we have 5 teams tied for top spot. So
It's
obviously it's
only
going
going
to
to
work
get
itself
better.
out, but
Right. And I mean,
uh,
the season's only going to get better come the playoffs because we're going to get that 12-team field and it's going to be crazy.
but yeah, the top 15 has changed up a decent amount since then because we had some big losses like A&M's, Clemson's, which A&M at least lost to like what I think is a decent team. It just was not in the fashion I was expecting.
Yeah.
But I guess we should just go ahead and pull up the rankings, get the show on the road. Our top,
Yeah, we
explain
can
that.
go ahead and do that. Yeah, there's a lot of movement. And let me present that. There's a lot of movement in our top 15 more or less, and a lot of teams also had buys. So teams that we had in our previous top 15 spots that had buys, they just kind of moved up accordingly. Can't really punish them for having a buy as it goes.
Teams above them lost, so we had no choice but to shift them up. And if you look at it, you can recall it's 10, 11, and 12. They originally were, I believe, 12, 13, and 14, and now they are 10, 11, and 12. So, but that's because we had Clemson, I believe, at 10 and Miami at 11, and we decided to move Miami up. So, because I still think Miami's struggling, but they're finding ways to win, and I just don't see them losing really to any of the teams below them here. So,
I mean, their remaining schedule really is just Cupcake City, and we're just gonna say that. But
but I'll
but
give them the
yeah,
benefit of the doubt because they got Cam Ward, they got the best offense in the country statistically. Again, they don't play anybody, but it is
I mean,
still an
we'll see.
ACC team. Still,
Right, we'll see come the playoffs what they got because they're most likely just going to end up getting written in at with their remaining schedule and everything.
oh, there's
And
no
I
way they
mean,
don't get in.
look, Miami is an example of a one-sided team, but they're one-sided in a way that can work out for you. Like if you're one-sided on offense, but you happen to just have a top-tier offense, I mean, you can still win games, win out, and even maybe win it all. Unlike an example of another team who is one-sided on the side of the ball that you don't necessarily want to be one-sided on, and that's Penn State, which is why they dropped so far because although they only lost to Ohio State by 7 points, watching the film and their performance on offense is just it's not it, man. They don't have offense capable of competing at an elite level. So, for what it's worth, they're still in the top 10, but that is an example of a one-sided team in a way you don't want to be. But for those of you who saw our last episode, a lot of these rankings will look familiar. Um, And yeah, we haven't been consistent as usual. We're professionals after all. We are professionally inconsistent. Um, but we're going to try to do this playoff projection every week. I was out of town this past weekend, so things just didn't work out for everything just gets busy, man. Everything just gets busy. But we're
Yep.
professionals. And we're allowed to be inconsistent because we're professionally inconsistent and objectively correct.
Yep.
Look at this top 15, bro.
That's
Look
our
at it.
slogan: consistently inconsistent.
The
So there's
consistently
there's
inconsistent professionals.
consistency there. So
It's all about consistency. So, but welcome back. For those of you
yes,
who, let me not tear down my setup. For those of you who regularly tune in to our cast, thank you. So,
yes. Thank you especially if you've stayed with us all this time. You've been one of those who've watched every episode. It
loyal
obviously
fans.
loyal fans, yes, sir. South Carolina type beat. You know what? Let me just say that. I know this. Look, if there's one fan base that I have an immense amount of respect for, it's the South Carolina fan base, man. It doesn't matter what kind of season they got going on. That stadium is packed, and they are. I know some South Carolina fans, man, and no matter what, they are rooting for that team. They got every game they're watching it, and like it's
Would you
rare you
say
see
that
that for an
they're
entire.
cocky?
No, they're not. Oh no, they'll definitely admit that they suck, but like they not now, which I think they're a solid team this season. I don't think they suck at all. Obviously not. I mean, I would
No,
there's
they're a good team.
three loss
That's a
team
good
and
team.
good wins. But yeah, I just wanted to say that. So if you're a South Carolina fan, respect. So and
Well,
also I think everybody's happy Vanderbilt's back in the ranking. AP top 25, put
V's
them back
up,
in the ranking. So
V's
V's
up.
up.
Back where they belong, top 25 team because they are.
So
Congratulations, Commodores. Welcome back.
I hate that they took that one-off loss to Georgia State early in the season before they had their footing, because if they didn't take that loss, there's a possibility they're in the talk for,
They're right here in the top 15.
playoff, maybe even, so because a two-loss SEC team, it doesn't matter if it's Vanderbilt, they're still playing SEC competition. So, and they're winning right now. So,
And
in the
let me
SEC,
say this since you mentioned the SEC,
I mean,
because there's a lot of people out there still. There's still a lot of the salty SEC deniers. And look, I hate sounding like a homer, and some of the SEC homers, as they call them, they do take it a little too far. They can get a little ignorant with it. But the reality of it is the SEC is still the deepest conference. It is still the most talented and competitive conference. It is what it is. Like the thing about it is this is real life. Like not every conference is built the same. They're not all equal. They're not, you know what I mean? And the fact of the matter is there's a lot of people out there saying, "Oh, the SEC is just mediocre this year, man. Look at South Carolina almost lost to Old Dominion and beat A&M and to bring up South Carolina and different arguments like that. But it's like if that's the stance we're taking, let's look at the standings. Let's look at the records of all the Power Four conference team layouts. If the SEC is mediocre, then the rest of the Power Four are just even worse. You know what I mean? If that's what you're calling the SEC, then you might as well just call the rest of the Power Four just bad because overall the SEC is still. I mean, they have the best out of conference record as they typically do.
the SEC
Um,
it gets hate because yes, it's like the teams never look that great, but it's because the SEC takes a lot of pride in battling its own opponents. So it's that battle for the conference. So the SEC, just like in years past, not recently, I will admit, like mainly because the East, but now that the SEC's been mixed in between the East and the West, you
or the
have
Midwest.
you definitely have like just there's a lot more parity now, and it's just they're demolishing each other right now. So I mean, Texas has only lost as an SEC team, Georgia's only lost as an SEC team, Vanderbilt's two losses, like only two out of their three, and one was like a weird one-off loss to Georgia State. I guess it was a Vandy loss. So it was just a weird Vandy loss. Somehow Vandy managed to do that and then go and beat Alabama. Alabama's only losses are SEC teams. Uh, so
Yeah, and obviously the argument is typically, oh well, you're just top heavy. It's just a top heavy conference, and it's like, well, you know, technically between the Big Ten and the SEC, which are the two best conferences this year, I mean, they're both top heavy, more or less, if that's the argument you want to use in terms of playoff contention. But in terms of competitiveness across the board, difficulties of schedules, conference wide, outside of just the playoff conversation, the SEC just has more competitive teams across the board.
right,
There's just it.
yeah.
Look, man, it's just a different game, and people get tired of hearing that. It's just a different game. Watch the film, watch the games, look at who goes in the NFL, look at the talent pipelines. It's look, man, the SEC is just football country and has been for a long time, and it is what it is. I mean, this is not an SEC specific podcast, and we're not trying to be SEC homers, and I know people are just tired of the SEC glazing and the media nonstop. There's a little bit of a bias there, but we're not going to sit there and say that it's not unprecedented because look at the all time record for bowls, interconference play, playoffs. Uh, look at the all time records for that. There is a huge gap between the SEC and every other conference, and especially in the past 20 years. It just is what it is right now. But anyway, I just wanted to put that disclaimer out there before anybody came and said, "Hey, SEC homers." Da, da, da."
And I guess what
Look,
I could say is we talk about top
the
heaviness. I
SEC is
mean,
better.
the Big Ten,
It's
I could say
better.
right now, there's only like the four teams we have in the top 15 here for the Big Ten are the only teams that I think are like have any shot at anything really, or like
That's the
are
thing. Outside, you
like
want to talk about top
noticeably good
heavy,
teams.
right? You want to talk about top heavy. The Big Ten has four really good teams, three playoff contender teams, I believe. I don't think Penn State's really necessary. They'll probably get in, but I don't think they're in that conversation in terms of actual actually being competitive. But you got four great teams, but then the rest of your conference is just dookie. Let's just be real. The rest of your conference is just mid. Okay, the SEC what, 4 great teams, 4 playoff contention teams, maybe 5. But it doesn't just stop there. Like, okay, the rest of the conference may not be playoff worthy, but they are better across the board than the bottom half of every other conference. And speaking of every other conference, we're not even going to talk about the ACC. It goes without saying the situation of the ACC and the Big 12. Look, man, the fact that the Big 12's best shot is right now BYU. And look, I ain't going to underestimate the boys you underestimate. I don't want to do it. But it's like your best shot to playoff right now is BYU. And besides Kansas State, who is like, I don't even know where they're at anymore at this point, and Iowa State, which was always overrated, they're not that is not a top tier team. Who like the Big 12 across the board, the rest of the way is just bad. They're just not good, you know. So anyway, just
Well, I
thought
guess
I'd
we
put
should
that
go
out
ahead
there.
and go through the explanation. We kind of already explained a lot of our
Right. I
rankings.
just
I
wanted
think,
to put that down just so that
yeah,
people would understand where we're coming from moving forward on our top 15 and the playoff rankings and
we
everything.
we we, we can like sprint through the top four. I think that's pretty obvious.
Yeah.
Oregon wasn't going to move. Another, they've just been handling business. They look like the most complete team right now, for sure. Georgia, I think they showed with the Texas win and everything, and even against Florida, the defense still looked good. Defense is great. I think Georgia's going to pull out the defense when necessary. The defense struggled a lot early in the game against Florida because Carson Beck, I think he's colorblind because I don't think he can tell the difference between the colors of the jerseys.
Look,
So, um,
Beck, and I'll say this: Beck doesn't throw these interceptions he's been kin to throwing lately. The Georgia offense rolls. You know, I just think
well, that's what I'm
turnovers
saying. It's
has
like
been the big because when
even
they're
the,
not turning the ball over, Beck is making big decisive plays, and the offense is playing good.
they're
Just don't
getting
turn the
down.
ball over, and
They're
don't drop passes either. They haven't
every
done that.
drive that ended in an interception, except for that one at the beginning of the second half. But every drive that he's throwing, even in the Texas game, there were multiple. Like the first interception he threw, they drove it all the way down to the red zone, no problem, and then he throws a pick in the
Right.
red zone, and it's like he did that with the first pick against Florida. He drove it all the way to the red zone and then throws a pick. And I just the thing is that I will continue to put faith in, maybe this is a little bit of a Georgia fan bias. I don't know, but I think it's just more so Kirby Smart bias because I still think the best coach in the country. I think he's just going to figure out a way to get it right.
I mean, Beck knows he's taking responsibility for it, and Beck stops throwing these interceptions. Georgia's offense
Yeah, I mean, no
rolls,
problem.
and the
So
defense goes without saying. Without Beck's turnovers, this team can win a national championship.
because we've seen
So
Beck last season, his accuracy, his decision making last season was not his accuracy was great. Not maybe not deep ball, but his short to midfield range balls were fantastic.
I mean, and he's still
And he was
doing good. Like when he's not making those dire mistakes here and there, it's good quarterback play.
yeah.
Just outside of those interceptions, is great quarterback play. I mean, and that's kind of what Kirby was touching on. But I guess
And
we'll move
Ohio,
on.
yeah, go ahead and move on to Ohio State.
Yeah,
They good solid win against Penn State. I pretty much that's why I think they're above. That's why we got them above Texas because now Ohio State actually has better wins than Texas, so
hmm
and still a better loss. Again, both have a top four, actually both have a number one or number two loss, but one was a two-score loss and one was a 1-point loss. So
hmm
so Ohio State's above, and they had a good solid win against Penn State. Still not excited about Ohio State's offense, but they put up 20 against Penn State, who I also think has a very good defense. Penn State's defense is great. Their offense,
they do.
though, was non-existent that game, and I think it's partly because Ohio State is a great defense, but I think it's a mid offense against a great defense, and yeah, you're just not putting up points. So I
Right.
guess
Which we touched on earlier, why they are where they are now. But
yeah, which is why we brought Miami above because we're like, okay, if you're gonna be mostly one dimensional, then offense is usually what you want to be one dimensional on.
right,
So
you
because
got to
again,
score points to win.
right. So, because defensive scores are extremely difficult to come
That
by.
yeah, that's relying on the opponent's mistakes more or less.
So Texas, I mean, again, they're not really moving. They had a bye, right? So
Yeah,
um, they didn't really move.
I still think they're a top 4 team. I do.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think a loss to Georgia is fair to like really just shoot them down and get
I
rid of
think
them.
the
I
problem
think
is they
I think that was a wake up call for them. That's the thing. I think that Georgia was a
yeah,
wake up
they had
call. It's like,
gotten too
okay, you
comfortable
you
playing
play you
lower
played the team
competition.
that was already battle hardened and knew what their mistakes it were and didn't fix all of them, obviously. But so Texas just kind of got their wake up call, and I think Texas learned from that, and I think they're going to play well in the future. And then Indiana, I mean, they just not much competition, but holy crap, dude, they're just absolutely railing everybody that they
Yeah, I
play.
mean,
It's
Indiana
like
has, even with a weak schedule, Indiana has looked like a championship contender. This is a historical season for them, and this is one of the best teams in college football, and I think they have a shot at the title.
I mean they're
Um,
9-0, and I believe every win is by two or more scores, which is just
yeah,
you know
and we talked about that in our last episode. The weak schedule, the weak schedule premise. It's like, okay, they got a weak schedule. That's part of the conversation always. But the question is, if you're top tier, are you clobbering these weak teams like you should be, or is it close, like in Miami's case, which is why Indiana's above Miami, because Indiana's played comparable, schedule competition as Miami so far, and Indiana's just been wailing on everybody. So
yeah. And
I think they're a playoff. I
with
think they're a
Miami,
top team.
we have them at 6. Obviously, as I was saying earlier, great offense. I mean, I think they probably. I mean, Restrepo is a phenomenal receiver. Cam Ward, obviously, Heisman front runner. Defense really needs to start making some changes if they want to win um, a national championship, which is why we don't really have them that high in our actual rankings, like in the top 4, top 3, or top 4, because I just don't quite think they're championship caliber yet until they can get that defense right.
Right.
And I guess my thing is like I know and I'll mention this because that's kind of almost seems like it seems like hypocrisy because we're like, oh well, Georgia's offense can't get it going because of Beck. It's like I think Beck's issues are much easier to fix than an entire defensive issue. Like Beck, if he just stops throwing picks, I think Georgia's literally
Right.
fine.
It's just Beck stops throwing those hasty picks, and Georgia's offense is still fine because the fact that Georgia's still turning the ball over as much as they are because of Beck's interceptions and they're still winning by, 2+ scores, that's still a statement to make. Miami is pulling out 1-score wins, 3-point wins every week, so it's like that offense misses one drive and they could get beat by an average opponent.
And something I heard, and I want this is like a little tiny short, like very short turnover on clowns thing. I was watching the Miami game, and Cam Ward throws across his body near the sideline, which you do not do as a quarterback. That is the biggest no-no ever. Because guess what? He did that, and he threw a pick. And a commentator was like, "Where's Cam Ward? He just has so much confidence in his arm, and he just like it's like, yeah, you're not supposed to do that, but that's just something he's always going to do. I just don't think you can." I'm like, okay, can we? That's crazy. We're not. Are we really going to sit here and excuse the biggest no-no of all time and say, "Oh, that's just how he is"? No, dude needs to fix it if he wants to be successful in the NFL. That's not. Don't do that. That can cost games.
It's that media glazing factor. It's like they can't
That's what I'm saying.
they raise somebody up so high that they can't make themselves look stupid, or they put somebody so high on a pedestal that if they make a mistake, it's just, oh, even their mistakes are amazing or great,
Also,
or oh, that's just
yeah,
what he does. It's like
on that whole thing,
they're
the
not
media
critical enough.
the media glazing of just players in general is insane. It's crazy
Yeah.
that you can get on, start watching a game, and you just hear the commentators gawking your
One
top
play
players all like
or
the
one right.
entire time.
One player, usually it's one player they're talking about the whole
And he'll
game. And I
take the
mean that.
smallest thing ever. He'll
Mhm.
freaking spike the ball, and he's like, "See, that was a brilliant decision there to spike the ball with 10 seconds left. Not many quarterbacks
Yeah,
know
they
to do
over
that."
exaggerate when they do just average stuff. They over exaggerate it. But
But
anyway,
yeah, that's a rant for another time. I think. Then maybe that's
so
future state of the sports segment or
right,
something.
and
But
we're going to try to keep this in good time. So let's try not to get too off
we
track.
got to start speeding though.
Tennessee is better than Penn State. Not even going to hear anything else about it. They are
Similar
not one
defense.
sided. They are their defense is just as good, if not better, arguably better than Penn State's. Their offense is capable. Penn State's is not. Tennessee is a better team than Penn State. Penn State above Notre Dame. Um,
Mainly just because Penn State was at least able to keep a close game against
right,
a top 5 or top 3 opponent in this case, and just again, Notre Dame's one of those where they've played better than I was expecting, but
but
again,
they haven't
out
played
of
anybody.
conference, they don't play anybody, and they don't have
Right.
a conference championship. So I just
But according to the criterion that we set for ourselves, that's still why they're in the top 10 and
yeah,
they're still above the rest of the guys under
because
them because they've
because
still been clobbering competition.
they've been clobbering, but they also have that one loss to Northern Illinois, and that's why I
Mhm.
don't feel in good faith that I can put them close to Indiana because Indiana's undefeated and hasn't even had a close game. Notre Dame's
Right.
had
They've had a couple of close ones.
had a couple close games and then a loss. One of those close games being a loss to NIU. So, and I know it's just one of those random crappy upsets, but it has to be taken into account. So, because that goes to show mentality of team is like, okay, well, you don't go into every game ready to just absolutely destroy. So I just think in this case, Navy just was a little overrated, and Notre Dame though was prepared because it was an undefeated ranked team they were about to play, and the 5-star top tier recruiting class outshined the military boys. So and then Alabama at 10. I know they're 2 loss, and we have them in 10. It hurt me to put them in the top 10 because of their 2 losses, and they weren't like great losses either. Like I don't think Vanderbilt's a bad team, but I still would bear like they would still probably only make like 20 or 21 on my top 25. So still not a great loss, but it was one score. But just Clemson and A&M lost, and they got dropped out 10 and 11. So it's like now we have to just shift everybody
By
up because they
default,
had a
yeah, by
bye. They
default,
had
the
a bye,
buys
and I don't
moved
want to
up.
hurt.
And I mean,
I don't want to kill Alabama and LSU for buys, and then BYU did they play? I think they played right. It was no, no, no. They had a bye as well. That's what it was. BYU had a bye because their last game was UCF on the 26th.
and the reason we have LSU and Bama Bama above LSU, because some may think that's not really right. They play this weekend. This is one of those situations where it's like, okay, Bama and LSU play this weekend. It will be decided this weekend. So
I think
they're
it's just the
right neck and
win.
neck in the rankings.
I
Yeah.
think it's the win
And
thing.
and Bama's
I
Bama
think
beating
both their
Georgia.
losses. I
Yeah.
think both their losses are comparable. I just think that Bama. Well, no,
They beat
okay. Actually,
Georgia.
LSU got kind of a. They got a little bit of a whooping from A&M.
Right, that too.
So, but Alabama's both their losses were close games against a solid
Right.
Vanderbilt team and a good Tennessee team. And then Alabama has the win against Georgia. So I think it's very fair to put Alabama above LSU, but this will be decided. And I think that's kind of why, like, I know there's the head-to-head A&M and LSU, but A&M also just went and got beat pretty bad by South Carolina. And I also, again, think that South Carolina barely belongs in the top 25, like 20, maybe 22, 23, maybe
Yeah.
20. You can interchange Vanderbilt and South Carolina, I think. So, but BYU, I just think they're the Big 12's only hope.
At
But I
this
don't think
point,
the Big
right
12 is a
now as it
great
stands,
conference.
yeah.
So, but they're winning solid. Had a couple close games, but they've still got some really good wins. The one over Kansas State.
I still have faith in Kansas State to still have a chip in, but BYU is looking like the Big 12's only hope, as you said. And good team. yes, great team, maybe. Elite, no. And I'm still not 100% convinced that this team is going to be like playoff on the same level as the other teams in the playoff if and when they get in. But we can talk about that later. But I think they're and this the rest of this, like, once we get past like 10 and 11, once we get past that, like, the rest of the field gets kind of confusing because the rest of like the college football field, particularly the Power Four, is it gets kind of confusing because most of the rest of the teams are about doing the same as the others. So, you know, BYU, I think they've earned their spot in the top 12 for now. Uh, Boise State,
This one's tough between A&M and Ole Miss. Like all three of these are kind of tough at this point because again, Boise State group of five, so it's hard to just immediately because I get it, they better record, but
hmm
I still think I still think there's a very good chance A&M or Ole Miss could both beat Boise State, but
well, you have to
going
ask
off
yourself the question because everybody's like, "Oh, well, they played Oregon and it was a really close game against the number one team in the country." And it's like, well, I don't think Oregon really had found their stride at that point. I'm not trying to take anything away from Boise State, but I think Oregon kind of slept on Boise State. And also, Boise State doesn't, they played that one opponent in Oregon, and the rest of their schedule has been a cakewalk. So I think if you put Boise State on a more consistently challenging schedule week to week, they may not look as good. So I think that plays a big part in it too. But I'm still going to give them their flowers because they're still the best group of five team, I think.
they're
So
winning, they're winning, and they have a good loss. Whether or not
yeah,
Oregon, we again, that sentiment you can't say for sure that Oregon just
can't
wasn't the
yeah we
team they
can't
needed to be.
prove
It's
that.
like
We
it's not
can't
really. I
prove
guess
that.
it's not really a
Right.
fair assumption. It's like I think we have to go based off of just where we are now. It's like okay, Oregon's the number one team in the country. You kept it close, so your only loss, I think, is a good loss. So, and then they
I
just
mean, one of the
consistently went on
best
top of that.
losses in the
So,
country. So
um,
I guess can't take it away from them.
you know, I think BYU. The reason we have beat them above Boise State is because I think BYU has a couple better wins. Um,
Yeah.
and of course, the loss does, even though it's a good loss, it's still a loss, so it's going to take away a little bit, you know. So, but A&M, they were, I think we had them at like 9 or 10. Um,
I think we're going to upset a couple of people going back to that SEC homer conversation that we had earlier, putting
yeah,
having A&M and Ole Miss at 14 and 15. Um,
but
with the way they have the rankings right now.
I have to go. They both lost to. Well, Ole Miss has that loss against Kentucky, and that's what made it really hard for me to decide between Ole Miss and SMU because man, that's a tough loss, but like we
It kind
talked
of
about
came
last
down
night,
to
Kentucky's not a good team, but
right.
they somehow seem to play every good team close. So, and maybe you give Kentucky, but the thing is, like Kentucky, I want to give them the benefit of the doubt and just say, oh, maybe they've had a difficult schedule, but they've got some bad losses too. I mean, they got blown out by Florida. So, the loss to Kentucky is
I think
bad.
Florida's gotten better though. Florida has gotten better over the
Yeah,
course
but
of the
like
season,
Kentucky,
obviously.
yes, but Kentucky also just, I mean, come on, like who else was it? And then, Ole Miss had the loss to LSU, which obviously we have LSU pretty high. We're high on LSU. So I think their other loss is fine. 3-point loss to LSU. So I think that's a fine loss. We expect you to lose probably by a field goal to the number 11 team at number
Right.
15. So I think that's a reasonable loss. You pretty much just did what we expected of you with that one. But the
I'll
loss
say
to Kentucky was tough. But earlier in the season, give them that. And then so I uh I just think it's because they just have they have a they have a good offense. Not great because their stats are a little padded, but I think they have a good offense. I think that my thing about SMU is just that there is no competition whatsoever. Ole Miss still has that blowout win over South Carolina, which I think is a very good win. SMU has no good wins
And they ran
except
up the
for
scoreboard against Arkansas, so that's another one you
that too.
mentioned.
And they just had a really good, and Arkansas beat Tennessee, a top 7 team. So I think it's fair.
I
I
mean,
think I'm of the belief that like you can interchange Ole Miss and SMU, but I think if the argument so
probably. I think
uh
if they played each other, it came down to like if they played each other, who would win, who's the better team head to head, and
and
I think Ole Miss would win. I think Ole
I think
Miss
Ole
is just
Miss's
more talented
defense. I think their
on
defense
both
in the
sides of
end
the
would
ball.
come out, and I think both offenses are comparable, but I think the defense is better on Ole Miss's
Right, the
side.
defense, yeah, definitely on Ole Miss's side.
And
Um,
A&M, I'll just say for them, bad loss to South Carolina, but they've looked great overall aside from that loss to South Carolina.
and they
Um,
rallied to whoop LSU.
they beat LSU, who I know but we've talked before. We don't just go based off head to head. We don't think you automatically belong above someone because of head to head. So that's why A&M's where they're at. But yeah, I mean they were also in Columbia, so like I think yeah, that's a hard place to play. In South Carolina's a hard place to play. So, and Shane Beamer just finds a way to have that team prepared for the most random games sometimes. So,
There's just a lot of things that
it's the
go
beauty
into
of
it.
Beamer ball, man. You can go in there, probably lose to Kentucky or some crap like that, and then go in there and beat a top 10 team. So, but I still think A&M's good. They're still in the running. Even with that loss, they're still 100% in the running for the SEC championship. So, and as we've said before, we think the SEC is the best conference. So that alone is a good thing to be able to say. So yeah, that's my take on the top 15.
Yeah, I mean, it's I hate to put the spotlight on the SEC all the time and seem like a SEC homer, but I just don't think SMU is better than Ole Miss. SMU has just had too many close games with mid and low tier opponents, and okay, they had good wins against Louisville and Pittsburgh, but first of all, Louisville, I think their 25 place ranking, I think 25th in the AP top 25 is, I think that's a good place to be for them. Um, they only beat Louisville by 7 points. Uh, so Pittsburgh, you know, stepping on, the stinky pits topic, which is, what my name is all about. I said Pittsburgh was overrated ever since ever since the media got high off of them. I've been saying it. We all should have known Pittsburgh was overrated. Uh, SMU beat Pittsburgh. I don't think Pittsburgh's a top 25 team. I don't care what their record is. They're not a top 25 team. And I mean, yeah, Pittsburgh, beat the crap out of them. But I don't think Pittsburgh's a good. I don't think they're all that great. Maybe a good team, but they're not great. And once again, I just think Ole Miss would beat SMU if they played each other. I just think they would.
I
But
agree.
like we said, I think Ole Miss and SMU is like 15A, 15B. They're kind of interchangeable at this point. I just think Ole Miss would get the better of SMU.
So I agree. And
So that
there you go. I think we can conclude our
that
top 15.
concludes our objectively correct Talk-Ons top 15. Pew, 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 pew.
All right. I
Uh,
guess we should go ahead and move straight into the next segment, which is our current playoff prediction. Now, we're not going to go through and predict the entire, we're not going to predict the playoff outcome. We are just going to predict what the starting bracket's going to look like.
we're going to predict who makes
So,
it in, basically.
and there, I said earlier that it's all going to be like what we think the committee. It's going to be a mix of that, but then obviously because of top four, to guess that you have to just assume who's going to win the conference championship. So there's going to be a little bit of our own prediction of conference championships and stuff. And obviously, we're predicting who we think is going to win out. But I think it's a mix of that. It's like who I think is going to win out. We're splitting it up. So we both have our own top 12, and we're going to kind of like maybe argue through that and build together. So I already have mine, and we based it off of the fact that it's like who we think is going to win out based on schedule and how they've played so far, and then based on those teams all winning out and playing how they did, how we think the playoff committee would rank them. So And there we go. My if hopefully that explanation made sense.
I think it works. This is the prediction of who we think the committee who is going to make the committee's selection for the 12 team field. Um, so now what I will do is I will swap over to uh well actually maybe I can do this. Oh, I can only share one thing at a time. All right. What I'm going to do now, folks, is present to you the Talk-Ons official, objectively correct 2025, 2024, 2025 season playoff projection bracket.
Now, I'll preface this because we're professionals and need to do the professional thing. This was a borrowed, you know, thanks to Sports Illustrated for letting us borrow this. I
We
don't think they
borrowed
let us,
their
but
bracketology image
yeah. So we got this, and
for
well,
professional
we
reasons.
changed it up a little bit for professionally changed it up for professional reasons. So yeah, and as you can see, we have it all lined up, and we're just gonna start arguing.
Yep, we're going
So,
to do exactly like we said we were going to do. We're going to go back to our roots. Uh,
which I think our top four is probably going to be pretty similar. I don't see how that's
we'll
going to be
see.
different.
But me and my bro here, we're going to talk about it one on one and some more or less debate on where we think these teams are going to land, who's going to be in the 12 team field. This is not pre decided. This is unscripted, pure, objectively correct football debate.
Yep.
So, shall we start with the conference champion seeds?
Yes, and I guess we'll start with number one. I think my number one. I think it's going to stay Oregon. I
You
think
think
Oregon's going to
Oregon?
win out. I think they're going to get the rematch over Ohio State. That's my prediction. I think they're going to get the rematch against Ohio State. I think Ohio State wins out regular season. Oregon beats them in the rematch, and Oregon gets put at number one still. And of course, they're going to be number one throughout, and I don't think they're budging. And I 100% believe the committee will keep them at number one. So,
Okay. So, for Ohio State and Oregon to rematch, Indiana would have to lose to
yes,
either Ohio State or lose another Big Ten game.
which I think
But even
the
then, if
only
they're
game that Indiana's losing is Ohio State. I think they lose to
you
Ohio
think you
State.
think Indiana loses to Ohio State,
Yeah, I think they do, but I think it's the same sentiment as the Texas and Georgia game. I don't think that it's Indiana's that much worse than Ohio State or anything. I think it just ends up being Ohio State's already had their games against good teams. So I think by that point, Indiana, yeah, they're blowing everybody out, but I think, it's still it's going to be a wake up call game a little bit for Indiana. I think it's going to be, hey, like, it's that thing. It's like the last team you want to have a wake up call against is like a Oregon or a Georgia or an Ohio State, because it's like, okay, well, you're finally having your first real test. I don't think they get like manhandled like Texas did, but I think they still lose. That's my belief. So,
well, I think Indiana has a comparable, if not better, offense than Ohio State. I guess my only argument would be is that Ohio State has a better defense, and Indiana hasn't played a top defense like Ohio State's, and maybe that makes the difference.
that's kind of my belief. That's what I'm saying. I just think that it's a team that they're not quite going to be prepared for. That's it. That's all it
But
is.
also, Oregon scored 32 points on Ohio State, and
Okay,
Indiana's
but
offense.
Ohio State, I think Oregon still has. I think Oregon has. I think Oregon has the most productive. I know it sounds weird to say that. I think they have the best offense in the country. Personally, I think it's the most well-rounded and balanced. So I know Miami's got the statistics, but Miami definitely hasn't played a defense. I think what it is that Oregon was just able to produce. They just played a good game against Ohio State. So, well, what were you thinking was your number one?
Well, honestly, if we were going to pick the Big Ten champion, I don't know, man. Because if
Because now remember,
I
think
think
about this
number
though.
one
This
is
is when
only
it
the
gets.
Big Ten champion if Oregon wins.
That's what
But
I was saying. That's why I'm saying it gets really complicated, because if you think Ohio State or Indiana wins Big Ten, then it's like, okay, then what are we doing? Now, granted, the question is, if Indiana wins, that means they go undefeated. So if Indiana goes undefeated and beats Oregon, do you think that they get put at number 1 by the committee?
Probably, yeah. Indiana would definitely be put number one, I
Now,
think.
so I agree. I think Indiana gets put number 1 if they go in and they beat number 1 ranked Oregon in the because by that point they'll probably be top 4, top 3, probably top 3. They'll probably take Ohio State's spot in the top 3. If they beat Ohio State. So, yeah, I think that's what happens. I think
Well,
100% that's what happens. I think Indiana, but the question is, do you believe Indiana is going to win the Big Ten? Do you think they beat both Ohio State and Oregon?
do I
Or do
think
you think,
Indiana beats both Ohio State and Oregon?
yeah, do you think they go undefeated and take the top spot? Because I think the only way Big Ten's getting top spot is if Indiana or Oregon wins. Ohio State's not taking the top spot.
Uh,
Well, actually, now that I think about it, they might, because if Ohio State stays number 3 and they beat a number 1 Oregon, but that's also relative to if we think the committee's going to even believe that, like, because then you got to go based off of how Georgia wins the rest of their season. If Georgia just runs the table and, if because they're number 2 right now, if they run the table and they win all their games, no problem, the rest of this season, including the conference championship, there's a good chance they
well,
get.
I'm trying to go by. I'm looking at the. This is hard.
I think Oregon wins out. I'm sticking with that. I
You
really
think
don't think.
Oregon wins out?
I think Dan Lanning has had enough of getting beat by Washington in rematches, and he's not gonna let a rematch be. He's gonna pull
Nine.
a Uno reverse, and he's gonna make sure
Uh,
he wins both games against Ohio State. And also, I just don't think Ohio State is as capable of a team as Oregon. And I think Dan Lanning's probably a better head coach than Ryan Day. Yeah, I know he hasn't been, but you know, okay, that was a little bit of Georgia bias.
well, here's the thing: Indiana beat both Michigan State and UCLA worse than Oregon beat them by quite a few points. Um, so this is kind of where I'm trying to like gauge it with common opponents. Um, I think okay. So I don't think Indiana's played an offense or defense as good as Ohio State's yet. So let's just say Ohio State manages to beat Indiana. I think it's going to be a close game. I think Ohio State's defense gets the best of Indiana, though. So Ohio State, you know, 1 point loss to Oregon. So you think Oregon won't let that? They won't let Ohio State win the rematch? Is what you're
I,
thinking?
I don't think Ohio State wins the rematch against Oregon. I don't think like I said, Dan Lanning's he's been beat in a rematch. He's been beat both times in the first
I
game of the
I
rematch.
I agree because my justification is that um my justification is I think Oregon has just more playmakers.
Yeah.
Big players make big plays in big games, including
Pro-
Dylan Gabriel. So
You
I
should
think I
probably
think Oregon, yeah,
no, I guess that's fine. Nothing. Never mind.
I think Oregon takes it. So I'll say Oregon ends up being the number one seed in the playoff field.
And I think so who's your number 2?
Well, considering it's power forward champions, um, I'm just gonna say, look, man, I'm just gonna go ahead and say I think Georgia ends up number two. I
I
think
agree.
Georgia ends up the number two seed. I don't think Ole Miss is going to beat them. I think they're going to handle Ole Miss. I think they're going to beat Tennessee, and I think Georgia's going to win out. If Georgia wins out, they go to the SEC championship. They'll most likely rematch Texas.
They're going to play Texas in the and
They'll
that's
yeah,
fine.
most likely
So
they'll rematch Texas.
so we
And
agree on the rematch, and I'm assuming because they're number 2, we agree that they win the rematch. So let's keep that in mind. So now Texas is a 2-loss team moving forward. So keep that in mind.
right, and Texas A&M. Who does Texas play
Texas
besides?
is only challenged next is Texas A&M, and Texas A&M kind of, you know, they kind of made it less believable that they can bring home the win against Texas this weekend. So
I think
I'm
Texas is going to have a bad taste in their mouth the rest of the season after what
yeah,
Georgia did to them. So I don't
agreed.
think they're going to
So
let A&M beat them. I think Texas is, if nothing else, more capable on offense.
let's keep
So,
that in mind. So now we have Georgia at 2, and then Texas is a 2-loss team. So
so Georgia, Georgia makes it in as the number 2 seed. Hell yeah, son!
and at
All
number
right, well, who's
3,
going to be number 3?
I put Miami at number 3. Sadly, they're going to be 3. They are. They're going to win out. They have the easiest schedule of their entire lifetime. They're going to be an undefeated Power Four, and they're going to win their conference champion because I don't really know who else is going to challenge them now that Clemson got absolutely manhandled by Louisville. I've lost a lot of confidence in Clemson. So I think Miami goes in there and has the easiest ride-in of any team in the playoff. So they get an easy bye.
Yeah, I think and SMU. I think SMU wins out, and if SMU and Miami play,
Miami beats SMU.
Miami probably beats
I think
SMU.
that might be the most
Honestly,
fun game ever, like the most fun offensive game you could watch. It's probably going to be like
it's
4.
definitely going to
It's
be
probably
offense
going to be like
heavy.
80. It's going to be like 84 to 78 or some crap like that. But like it'll be a fun game at least. But um, I'll just go ahead and say this: I don't think Miami makes it past the semis. So
I don't think Miami will last long.
or the quarters. My bad.
I don't think they'll last long. People are going to hate hearing that, but I think the only reason they're going to end up being in this playoff field as they are is because of the easy schedule they've had, and they've just managed to squeeze out wins with a great offense. I just don't think they're going to
And
survive
I'm
the
not a
playoffs.
Miami hater either. I'm just a
We're just trying to be
I'm just
objectively
upset. I'm
correct.
just upset that they're definitely going to get like just written into this. It's going to be the easiest cakewalk to the playoffs ever.
Yeah,
And you know, I just once they play a good team, I like a really good team. I think it's bad news for them. So, because let me tell you something, the last thing you want to do is have your first real defense in the quarterfinals of the playoffs. That's not that's no bueno. So, now number 4, who do you have for number 4? I probably can assume it's probably the same as mine.
number 4. Well, once again, Power Four conference champion. So Kansas State was my favorite to win the Big
Oh,
12.
you think Kansas State?
Well, they were,
Oh,
but
okay.
after losing to Houston and now kind of messing up their record, I think they went out. I think Kansas State beats Iowa State at
Agreed.
the end of the season.
I just don't.
But the problem is will it would if that happens, it will be Kansas State and BYU in the conference championship. Who wins that matchup? Who wins the rematch? I think Kansas State had a freak game, catastrophic game against BYU, which is why it ended up the way it did. Um, but Kansas State, I've been losing faith, man, because their offensive production is just so inconsistent. I don't know what it is.
Yeah, I'll be honest. This one was a tougher decision for me because I think it being a rematch, I think the Big 12 championship is a toss up.
Right.
But all I gotta say is that the Big 12 better hope that BYU who gets in because although I don't think BYU is crazy good, I definitely think they're better than Kansas State. So they better hope Kansas State doesn't freak out and win one because or an 11-2 Kansas State is getting destroyed in the playoffs. So
I
um,
don't think BYU is going to have a great time either, but I digress.
I agree,
Once
but that's what I'm
again,
saying. I think
once
that's
again,
kind of what I'm saying. BYU's not going to have a great time, but Kansas State definitely isn't going to have a great time because I think
but you know
BYU's
what?
better.
Don't count out the boys you underestimate. I got BYU
Yeah.
going in number 4. We'll see. So now we
Okay,
got to fill out the
so
rest of the field.
number 5
Okay.
for me is going to be a team that just straight up benefits off their loss to Ohio State. They got a super easy schedule coming up the rest of this season. Um, and I think because of that, everybody, including the committee, is always high on this team. It's got to be Penn State. I think Penn State has to be number 5. I 100% think the committee's going to have Penn State at number because they're going to be 11-1 with their only loss being a one-score loss to Ohio State. There's no way they don't get number 5.
Okay, but what about Indiana? And what about Ohio
Indiana.
State themselves?
Well, Ohio State's going to be 2 lost by this point. So, and I know committee is
But
a
it'll be
committee
another
of many.
loss to Oregon in the conference championship.
Yeah, but I still think they're going to take that into account. It's like, okay, well, you've rematched a top team. You've played a top team twice, and you couldn't get the win. So, do you really belong to be that high? Do you really belong that high in the bracket? I just don't. Look,
Well,
it's the
okay, well,
committee,
what
man.
makes you
It's the committee, man. I know how the committee works. They're not going to put a 2-loss Ohio State above a 1-loss Penn State.
what
or,
makes you
or
think
or a
they'll
one
put Penn
loss Indiana,
State?
I guess Indiana, I could put Indiana at number 5, but I guess knowing the playoff committee, they respect head to head as well. So yeah, Ohio State probably will be above Penn State as well. So I guess if that's the
You mean
case,
Indiana?
I think no Ohio. See, that's
Because
the
you were
thing.
saying the head to head, but Penn State lost to Ohio State too. So
That's what's confusing because I don't think the committee wants to put a 2-loss Ohio State above either Penn State or Indiana. I really don't. Even though the head-to-head is going to be a factor, I think they're 2 losses, and I know it's
I
2 the
don't
number
think
1
the
team in the
losses.
country, but
I don't. The committee is not so hinged on that win loss absolutism as the AP is, and knowing it's Ohio State, I guarantee you they'll put Ohio State over Penn State.
okay. But what do you think they'll put them over Indiana, even with the head-to-head? Because, like you said, I agreed with you that it's going to be a close game between Indiana and Ohio State, and Indiana's only loss will be Ohio State. So how can you be super high on Ohio State, but at the same time be down on Indiana because their only loss was a close loss to a team you're already high on? You know what I mean? So
Well, Ohio State would have their only two losses would have been twice to the number one team in the country, and it's Ohio State. And you know how they are about Ohio State.
yeah, but I still think they put in okay, but then of the same thing, it's like, yeah, but if we're gonna go based off losses, Indiana's loss is still a good loss.
And
So
Indiana has beaten their opponents better than Penn State. I think they put Indiana over Penn
I
State. I
agree.
think
I
Indiana goes over Penn
100% think
State.
Indiana. Okay, but I 100% think that Indiana goes number 5. They have to. I do not think that Indiana goes below Ohio State. I think it's one of those things where I think the committee is going to believe, yeah, there's the head-to-head, but you know what?
Where are
It's
they
still
playing?
it's still 2 losses.
Where are they playing? Are they playing in Columbus?
Yes, it's in Columbus. So
Okay, so Indiana loses a close one against Ohio State in
in
Columbus.
Columbus. So now
All
we're
right.
factoring neutral site ideas as well. So it's like, I 100% think Indiana goes number 5. So,
Okay. I
but
think I'll
I
take
think
that.
I agree with you that Ohio State goes over Penn State. And the reason is because the head to head, and that one was in, why can't I remember the name of their stadium? It was in Penn State. It was at Penn State. So I
Right.
think that really hurts their case. But let's not forget someone. Notre Dame.
Texas or
Notre
Notre
Dame's
Dame.
going to be
Yeah.
11-1 going in here, and their
You
only
think so?
loss being yes. I don't see them losing anymore, bro. They have the easiest schedule of all time.
They're playing Army. It's not
That's
a
true. It's
top
not okay.
elite
Maybe not the
team,
easiest, but
but they
but
already beat the crap out of Navy, and I don't think Army's all that much better than
yeah. I
Navy,
mean, like,
truthfully. Um,
so. But
Army
the
is one
question is,
dimension. Here's the thing: Notre Dame has a really good defense, and Army is one dimensional, just ground game triple option. Um, and I don't think Army's defense is like enough to stop, even though Notre Dame doesn't have the best offense. I think Notre Dame wins that, and it may be a close game. I think Notre Dame wins it
right?
though.
Okay, so here's my belief. I think Notre Dame goes above Ohio State. And obviously, I think it's because everybody's always high on Notre Dame. Don't know why. Even the playoff committee has been high on Notre Dame in the past. So I think Notre Dame goes above Ohio
So
State.
we
And the
think Notre
reason
Dame at 6
I think Notre Dame
because
will be number 6. And here's my argument is I think it's only because, okay, Ohio State loses to Oregon twice, and then you're starting to wonder, okay, well, you're losing to Oregon twice. You lost in the conference championship. That's a big game. Are you really worthy of being that high? It's like we're still keeping you in your Ohio State, only 2 losses to a big team, but you lost twice, and it's like that's tough because it's like, can we trust you? It's like, okay, well, if you've lost twice to a really good team, it's like, okay, well, you've lost twice to them. It's like, how are you going to do it? Are you just going to lose a third time in the playoffs?
Right.
It's like, so I think that's going to be there. But I still think that now Ohio State,
Okay, so we have to ask that same question about Texas too, because if we're going by what we played out with Texas, where do we put Texas?
I have Texas pretty low. I had Texas all the way at 10.
Really?
Yeah. And that's
Well, we'll
because
get to that.
and I'll, we'll get to that because uh but I think now at 7, do you agree? I think we can put Ohio State at 7.
Yeah, I think Ohio State will go at seven,
I think
especially
they
if they
go at
beat in,
7.
if they beat Indiana,
Yeah, I
definitely.
think they have a chance to go at 7, which that will make them the highest 2-loss team here.
Right. And I think we all know how much they, glaze Notre Dame.
Well,
So they're
now
if Notre
now
Dame wins out, they'll definitely be number 6.
now we're getting to what we think is now we're getting to the juicy stuff because I think Penn State goes at 8 now. I think they go based off head to head and they directly just put Penn State below Ohio State. Like I think that makes sense, right? I believe Penn State will be 11-1, and I think you have the fair head to head in at Penn State. They won at Penn State. I think Penn State goes at 8.
Penn State.
There's no way they put a 2-loss Texas above a 1-loss Penn State and their only loss being Ohio State. There's just no way. No way. And it was a
But even
close loss to
if
Ohio
his only
State. So
loss is Georgia too, you got to think about that.
it would be
I
two
guess the
losses to
question
Georgia
then
though.
is,
That's my argument. But again, here's the thing. I just think that I still think, it's crazy. Neither of them have really played anybody, but I still think that uh what's the word I'm looking for? I still think that Penn State will probably have better wins than Texas. I don't remember who else. I mean, Texas's only win will be A&M.
well,
Their only
Texas is
good
going to
win.
play Arkansas and A&M,
I come
good
on.
teams.
I don't know because then Arkansas's stock is hurt now after allowing 63 to Ole Miss. So
Uh, I mean, yeah, I mean, I guess Texas hasn't really beaten opponents that much worse, that much better
look,
opponents.
I get it's the
I mean,
committee and it's
their best win is
Georgia.
Michigan. 31-12 against Michigan
Their
is
best
technically
wins
their
will be
best win.
A&M and Michigan, and
Right.
by this point, A&M's probably going to be ranked like 18th or 19th. So it's like,
Okay, but what would Penn State's best wins be moving forward? And they'll have a common opponent in
uh,
Washington. We won't see it until after this Saturday, but they'll have a common opponent in
Illinois, and
Washington.
again, common opponent.
Actually, no,
We'll
no, no,
see
no.
that.
I take that back. No, they.
No,
I
you're
don't.
right. I was gonna say it.
I got mixed up with last season. Um, sorry.
I mean,
Trying.
their best win's gonna be like Illinois, but Texas. They both have. I think I'm going based off of this. It's like you got beat up the first time you played.
Illinois beat Michigan, didn't they?
Yeah, you
So
got beat up. You got beat up the first time you played. Uh, you got beat up the first time you played Georgia. Then you lost again the second time you played them. And it's like, again, I think it's just one of those things where um, Ohio State's
yeah,
really going to be helped by their win over Penn State, and that's where I think like Texas, because Texas is not going to have a great win. Their best win is going to be A&M, and Penn State's not going to have a great win. But Penn State's only loss is going to be a close loss to a good Ohio State team. It's like one that they're going to be high on. So that's why I really think that I had Texas all the way down at 10 because you're
right.
going to be mind blown by who I have at 9.
I think West Virginia. West Virginia is about the same type of opponent as Michigan is, and I mean Penn State beat West Virginia uh, just about as a little worse than Texas beat. Uh, did
Michigan.
Illinois play Michigan? I don't think they did.
Yes, they played Michigan and they beat up on them by like 2 scores. So
Oh yeah, they did. Okay,
Michigan,
so
not a good win.
all right, we'll have then. I guess we have to put Penn State over Texas then.
Because I think this is one of those things where I think the loss helps them. I really think that close loss to Ohio State helps them. because I think what hurts Texas the most is the bad loss to Georgia. They may have a good loss to Georgia in the SEC championship, but they have a bad loss to Georgia as well. So
Um,
I guess I just believe that the playoff committee is going to have this idea. So, okay, it's the big game hump. You can't beat Georgia. Same thing with Ohio State. You can't beat Oregon, so you got to be down to like 7. So, but again, the committee is going to be high on Ohio State because they always are. So, and I
right.
agree with that. So I think we go. I think we go Penn State at 8.
Okay, I think that makes sense. So Penn State directly translates from where they are in our top 15 at number 8 to
Yep,
number 8 in the playoff.
because we're just always right about everything. So
Objectively correct. I mean, Penn State's just going to cruise by
they'll
default, just get
cruise, and
written
again, like I
in from
said,
where they are. They'll just stay where they are and just get written in.
yeah, and they have a competitive game against Ohio State, which shows that they can be competitive against another top 10 opponent. So they belong in the top 10, I believe. So, well, I don't think they actually do. I just think the committee's going to have them in the top
All
10.
right,
But
so I guess
I
then
mean, I
we
guess
put
we
Texas.
believe they belong, but you know what I mean.
Okay, so now we have to start wagering between teams like uh, Texas, LSU, Tennessee, because
So,
I think Georgia beats Tennessee, so Tennessee ends up 2 losses, and there's no guarantee they beat Vanderbilt either.
so here's the thing.
So
I,
we,
I that's what I'm saying is I believe that Tennessee is going to struggle with what they have remaining. I think they're going to lose to Georgia. I think there's a good chance they lose to Vandy or at least have a close game against Vandy. I don't think Tennessee makes the playoffs. And here's my explanation why.
I'm thinking the
I
same
think
thing.
I think we both know that Texas is going a two-loss Texas is going above a two-loss Tennessee. I think we can both agree on that.
I think Tennessee is going to lose to Georgia, and they might lose to Vanderbilt. I think it's 50-50
And
Tennessee loses to
and here's
Vanderbilt.
where head-to-head gets screwed because I think a two-loss Alabama gets in over a two-loss Tennessee, even though the head-to-head's there. But I think it's because of Bama's win over Georgia, and then Georgia beats Tennessee, and so head-to-head no longer matters because you have because the common opponent has now been decided. So, and I think
So
Georgia wins fairly handily too
who
over
do you
Tennessee.
think wins?
But you want to
Who
know
do you
who
think
I
is going
had
to
at
be
9?
knocked back after this Saturday, Bama or LSU?
I
That's the
think
big
Bama
question here.
wins. I think Bama finish. I think Bama wins out, but they just don't. They missed the conference championship. But here's who I have at number 9. I don't have Bama or Texas at number 9. I have Boise State at number 9.
Boise State at 9.
Yep, they'll be the ride in. They'll be the ride in. But remember, they'll be the ride in G5. But because they're gonna, I think they win out their conference. I think they go 12-1. And I just think that because Boise State's going to have to be in there, I think Boise State, because I think that loss to Oregon helps them so much. I really do. I think that close game to Oregon 100%
I don't
pushes
think. I
them up
think the
there.
committee. I think the committee still goes a lot on like roster talent and power competition.
I think they go very big on wins and losses too.
I
I
think.
100% think they do as well.
I
So,
think a two-loss Texas is higher than Boise State. I
I
think they
mean,
put
I
Texas
don't I
higher.
don't think I'm complaining about that, but I think a one-loss Boise State goes above a two-loss Bama. I think
I think
Boise State.
Boise. Well, here's the question. It's like, is the Group of Five champion automatically number 12, or is it just like where they fall
No,
record
they
wise?
it's just so okay. So here's the if they're already in the top 12 before they win their conference, once they win, they're in no matter what. But if they're already in the top 12, they just stay where they're at in the top 12. If they win and they're not in the top 12, they get put right at 12. Does that make sense?
Right.
I guess no. Okay, here we go. They have to get put in. So if the committee is just completely against putting them in, don't think they're better than any team, but they're conference champion, they have to be put at 12. But the committee can put them wherever they want. There's no automatic placement. They can go wherever they want. Most people just believe they're going to be 12 because it's like, okay, well, they're the group of 5. They have to go in. So might as well just throw them at 12. But I think the committee is going to be high on Boise State. just because of their Heisman running back and because of
Mhm.
their statistical defensive line. They're statistically dominant defensive line. I
All
really
right.
think that they're going to be on a high on Boise State, but
Uh,
I can agree with Texas going at number 9 above them. But I don't think they
right.
go. I don't think Bama. I don't think a 2-loss Bama goes above them. Actually, I take that back. There's no way that the committee puts Boise State above a 2-loss Alabama, even a 2. I mean, the committee's always high on Bama. So I think we go. I think we got to go Texas 9, Alabama 10. Right? I think that's fair. If you agree that Bama is going to win out, that is. I think they do, but
I honestly, the LSU game, I don't know, man. I'm a little, I don't know. It's hard, honestly. Um,
I mean, it's going to be a close game. I 100% think it's going to be a close game, but I really do think that Alabama pulls through. But if
I
that's
think
the
after
case,
Alabama's, disappointing loss at Rocky Top, um, and Tennessee's defense is definitely better than LSU's.
I know
Let's
they're
not
in
forget.
Death Valley, but
Well, let's not forget the Iron Bowl either. I know Auburn ain't really much of anything this year, but
I don't think I'm worried this time around because
uh,
the
Kalen
Iron Bowl
DeBoer's never played an Iron Bowl before, so
because the Iron Bowl is also is that on a neutral site? I don't remember, or is it? No, I'm pretty sure that's. I think that'll be in Tuscaloosa.
yeah, it is going to be in Tuscaloosa this year. Okay, and
So
considering they beat Georgia in Tuscaloosa, I guess I'll just take DeBoer to win that one.
and I think Alabama pulls out a close win against LSU, and of course a 10-2 Bama is going to get in. They just are. The fact that a 2-loss team can now get in the playoffs, the committee's going to make sure that a 2-loss Alabama gets in.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think considering, like we said, we're going off of the committee's decisions, what the committee is going to have going on. Yeah, I think Bama makes it, and I think honestly,
Oh,
they're just going to be high on DeBoer if he wins out, and they're just going to want to put him in the playoffs.
that
So
gives
yeah, I
us
think Bama. I think that's right. That gives us a Bama Ohio State
which
matchup
would
in
be
the
nice. I would
playoffs.
love that. That would be a
That'd
crazy
be
fun
that'd be
game.
crazy.
Georgia and Alabama, they could get a rematch between them two. So, of course. But besides that, that's another thing that I think we should all be high on this playoff for is because we also get some crazy good games that we may have never gotten before. So,
Hmm.
like, come on, Alabama, Ohio State, Texas, Penn State. So speaking of that, now who are we going to put at 11? I think now Boise State goes at 11.
I think the SEC has made their mark here. I don't think any more SEC teams are getting
No,
in
I
because I think
agree.
LSU, Tennessee, and Texas A&M I think will be knocked
There'll
out
be
of the
three.
running.
There'll be three loss at this point, and I just don't
Right.
see the committee putting. There's no way the committee. I get losses aren't always everything, but there's no way a committee puts 3-loss SEC team over a 1-loss Boise State. If that's the
And
case, then there's definitely some bias there.
all of the teams that would make it in the Big Ten are accounted. So the SEC and Big Ten have made their spots. Uh,
So
so
I
now it
think
kind of
Boise
comes
State.
down to
Now hear me out. Boise State's definitely 11.
I would agree. I think they'll put Boise State at 11.
At this point, based on the field we have, I think Boise because every other team's going to be 2-loss, and I don't think they're going to have much better resumes than Boise State.
Right.
So
And also they're just, they're going to be high on the Heisman, hype and, I think they're also going to try to
Cincy and
I think they're going to try to avoid putting Boise State at 12 because I think people might take that the wrong way as them like pigeonholing the group of 5 champion to the last spot in the playoff. So,
maybe I don't know if that's. But then number 12 for me was SMU.
mm, you think SMU is going to get in?
Yeah, and here's my argument for that is that SMU will at this point in the playoffs, by this point, right after conference champions, I think they go to the conference championship. I think SMU wins out, and I think they go to the conference championship. And then I think they lose to Miami, like we mentioned, in a close game, right? We agreed it would be a close game. If that's the
Mhm.
case, there are only 2 losses at this point. They are a 11-2 team, and their only 2 losses are number 3 and number 4 by maybe 1 score each. So that's my argument for why they get in. So, and again, then I believe they're the only and now we're arguing for other 2-loss teams. Like I don't, I'm not sure who else would be 2-loss at this point. Just a few teams probably.
So if Clemson were to win out, you don't think they'd have any kind of argument in it?
Uh,
Well, no, not if their only ranked games were both getting beaten pretty badly. So yeah, I
I
think I think Clemson's done, man. I think they're
Clemson
done.
got Clemson killed themselves with that loss because they're pretty much I think Miami and SMU went out, and because of that Clemson has no way to get into the conference championship now. So I think they're 2-loss, and I think that and again they have a blowout. And I know SMU, and that's kind of my argument is that Clemson and SMU will have comparable losses, and those comparable losses are both two top 4 teams. Well, Clemson got blown out by a top 4 team. SMU, I think, is going to have close games between 2 top 4 teams. Even though they're losses, it'll be close. So that's why I think SMU makes it at 12. I I just don't see anybody else right now getting because
I'm looking at the Big 12.
actually come to think of it, no, never mind. Uh,
I'm looking at the Big 12 right now.
maybe
Because
Army, but that's assuming that they beat Navy. But they also don't play Navy till December 14th.
no, they don't. The Navy game's not gonna. That's not gonna be accounted for.
Oh, you're right.
That's not going to be accounted for. It's going to come down to Army's performance moving forward and their game against Notre Dame. I think maybe it's a close game against Notre Dame. I think Notre Dame beats them by 14, honestly. Um, Army
Well,
just doesn't have the resume, man. If they lose to Notre Dame by,
that's what I'm saying.
they don't have the
SMU.
resume.
The thing is, SMU doesn't have great wins, but they have they have solid wins, not great, but solid. And then we talk about good losses. I mean, close loss to number 3 and number 4, I think, are pretty good because that can make an argument. Oh, well, had close losses to who we have at 3 and 4 in our playoff, so that means that I mean, you've presented competition against our quarterfinalists. So it's
Right. The
like,
same kind of logic that kind of helps Boise State, honestly.
right. So,
So
and that's what I'm thinking. Like, I think, but Boise State is the one-loss one to number 1. Their only loss being to number 1, where SMU has 2 losses, but both only to number 3 and number 4, close ones. So I really think that that's how I think SMU gets in.
okay, so Kansas
So,
State, they went out and we said they would lose though to BYU in a rematch. So Kansas
yeah,
State would
we
be
said
three
so
loss.
they'd be 3-loss, and
They'd be
again, I
10
think
and
it's one of
3.
those things. It's like, but you lost your rematch, and you also had a bad loss. You lost to Houston, so and SMU just isn't.
SMU,
The thing is that I don't understand. Like, to me, like, losses to bad teams mean or
or I
is
mean,
probably
not Kansas State would be 9 and 3. Sorry.
losses to bad teams are like the worst thing you can have on your resume. Like, it just is. You cannot lose to a bad team without it just tanking your resume. You know. So
They had a close game with Kansas. They lost to Houston. Um, they got beat bad by BYU the first time. And although I think it was like a one-off catastrophe game for them, the committee's definitely going to be looking at
oh
that.
yeah, take that into
They're definitely going to
consideration.
be looking at these things. They
You
only
have
beat
to go based
Colorado
off
by
your
3
resume.
points. Colorado's not getting in. They only beat Colorado by 3 points. Hmm. I don't know though. We didn't think about that because I had eyeballed them earlier. So if Kansas State beats Iowa State and then Kansas State loses to BYU, I think Colorado wins out, and that would make Colorado 10 and 2. You think they'd put a 10 and 2 Colorado at number 12 over SMU?
No, no, not over SMU.
So I think at this point it's between honestly with the way things are going to play out, I think it's going to be between Colorado and Colorado also lost to Kansas State, so I don't know if they
That's what I'm
put them
saying.
in and not
I
Kansas State.
I SMU's resume is not gorgeous, but it's not bad.
But they also lost to Kansas State by 3 points, and head-to-heads don't always tell the whole story.
Because I think the win at Duke and I think the win against Pitt are solid wins.
Oh, they also got beat really bad by Nebraska, so
I
yeah.
mean, Duke was 6-2 going into that game, and they beat Duke at home. So
You think
Duke's only loss is being to Tech.
there's no
No, no,
guarantee
no,
Colorado.
no. Duke was a one-loss team going into that game against SMU, and their only loss being to Georgia Tech in Atlanta. So, like SMU, I think that's, I mean, and then they kept it, and Duke kept it close with Miami up until the fourth quarter.
And there's no guarantee Colorado beats Texas Tech either. Because Texas Tech is not great, but they'll upset you.
I think the only
So
team I am for sure about, or that I feel for sure about, is in winning out is SMU, and I'm sure that they go in and keep a close game against Miami as well. I really do. So, and I think that 2 close games against 3 and 4 really help them because they're
so
also
you
the like.
okay. Yeah.
So
Yeah, I think I agree. I think as you said, I think it's a
if the committee
uh-oh.
somehow, I obviously playoff rankings come out. It's like I'm not sure how they do the playoff rankings now with the top 12. I don't know if they're going to come out with predetermined like ones where the committee's going to predict who they think is like the top 4. That's kind of weird. I don't know how you can like as the committee predict that, like give official playoff rankings just based on who you think's going to win. Like I
No,
find that weird, but
I think they're gonna come out with it like they're gonna have a playoff ranking reveal day, and they're gonna just in one go reveal the top
that's what
12.
I'm assuming. I feel like that's what you have to do. But
Well, I mean, I can't argue because considering the field, the way everything else is with conference standings, and where everybody's going to look going forward, yeah, I think SMU has the clearer path. I think it's SMU, Kansas State, and Colorado. Honestly, on that last spot with the way the standings are set up, or
yeah,
Army, if Army doesn't,
Army,
if
yeah, I mean,
they manage to not get blown out. But I think you're right. I think with SMU's path moving forward, and what they've done so far, and their only loss being to a close game to who would be number 4. I think SMU gets in. Yeah,
yeah.
because there's no guarantee either. There's no guarantee neither Colorado nor Army will win out, and if Army gets beat by Notre Dame bad enough, they're out.
Yeah,
So,
if
and
they if they if
I
they
think
get if
Notre
they
Dame
get the
beats them
Navy
bad.
treat, yeah, if they get the Navy treatment, they're out the playoffs for sure. So
I
because
think
that's
Notre Dame
also
beats them by at least
one
two
of that,
scores.
because in a loss like that late in the season kills you. It destroys
Yeah.
everything. So that's why SMU, I'm confident they'll keep it close against Miami in a conference championship, and I think that because of that, SMU gets to keep it close against the number 3 team, in a conference championship right before the playoffs. I think that gets you a ride in. Like I think that helps you out a lot. So there we
Well,
are.
folks, there you have it. I guess we've come to terms with our top 12. This is our projection, the official, objectively correct Talk-Ons 12-team playoff field projection. This is who's going to make it. This is who the committee's going to pick and how they're going to lay it out for the top 12 come the end of the season. Mark our words.
I
Take a
actually
good
want. Oh,
gander.
I was gonna say
One.
actually want to really make sure we record this one because I want to see how close this is to like the actual final rankings. Our very first prediction. I'm curious to see how
Yeah.
close the very first one is at the end. So
I mean, it will be, once again, this is going to be something we do recurring. So based on how things play out, we'll see.
I'm curious to see
We
if we ever
we
get it right, like spot
we
on
may
at least one of them.
right. We may end up adjusting things here and there, truthfully. So,
Oh yeah, the plan is to do it every week and just see if things change and how we feel. But you
but from
know,
our predictions looking forward, this is where we have the 12-team field ending up. when
So
it's all said and
obviously, if
done.
we're correct and these teams just went out, this is what we're going to stick with. So like, but we'll see how things change. So obviously, it's no guarantee that these teams are going to, no absolute guarantee these teams are going to win out. So
So let's see. We got wow. It seems like based on our predictions, the Big Ten will have the most spots in the playoff.
yeah, wow, we only have 3 SEC teams.
Siri, go
The,
away.
the ACC will actually have 2 teams. Wow, based on our predictions.
Why does it, I did not say anything about go away, Siri. Sorry, freaking
The Big Ten and the SEC still kind of like own the
I mean, I
bracket for
think the
the most
Big Ten I
part.
think
There's 7.
as we talked about before, the difference in why the SEC is not going to get as many teams in as the Big Ten is because the Big Ten is more top heavy and they
Yeah,
have an easier schedule average going on.
the SEC is
The
killing
SEC,
itself.
right? The SEC is a little deeper, a little better across the board, a little more competitive on the bottom half. The schedules are a little harder, if not quite a bit more hard. So that it's just the difficulty of the SEC is really just what's going to keep the SEC from getting as many teams in as the Big Ten. The Big Ten just has easier. They're going to have more, write-in type berths. So like Penn State,
Yeah.
as we talked about before, which I think Penn State's the only one that makes that difference. It's just because Penn State's going to get that write-in,
Yeah.
if they went out. So,
So, all right. Well,
which they have
that
an
is
easy schedule
our
remaining. So we'll see.
Talk-Ons Week 11 college football playoff prediction
This is
bracket.
what the
So,
playoff 12-team field is going to look like come selection day. We're objectively correct professionals, consistently inconsistent, but this we are right. I promise. Nothing will change ever moving forward. So
all
that
right.
has been our projection. And this episode took quite longer than we thought it would because, I mean, we put the re-ranked top 15 and talked about that a good bit
Yeah. I knew the
along with
argument
the
here for the playoffs. I mean, we spent like literally
projection.
like 10 minutes on number 1 alone. So,
Right. And I mean, I knew that was the thing. And honestly, we probably should have been a little quicker, if not omitted our top 15 re rank and did that
yeah.
separately. I don't know. But I kind of felt like just because we were getting behind, it made sense to just put it all in this episode. And hopefully, as we always say, and never happens, hopefully moving forward, we will be more condensed and be able to be more like consistently segmented. So, but either way, if you are a loyal fan and you watch the whole thing anyway because you're a winner and you're not a loser who quits, uh, and you stayed with us this long, thank you. Thank you
Indeed.
for being a
Thank you.
loyal fan. Thank you for
Uh,
watching.
I appreciate you staying the whole hour and a half. And if you were one of those who skipped to the end just to see the bracket and know the end of the bracket, shame on you. Shame on you.
Shame,
For
shame.
shame.
You're
Uh,
you're
but
you're. Never mind.
anyways, but yes, thank you guys for watching. We'll try and do, we'll make a decision next week on if we just skip straight to that. We just do a bracket, the playoff bracket next weekend. Maybe we'll make a decision. I think that depends on how this weekend goes. If it is just a crazy weekend and things just fall apart, then we'll probably need to do just the bracket because that'll need to be
Right.
rethought. Maybe
I
if we
think that's
think,
going to be that's going to have priority moving forward at the end of the day.
yeah, and
So
then but if things kind of just go smooth sailing and everybody we have here wins their games like they're supposed to, then there's not much to talk about. So we can just kind of like throw it on there and be like, yeah, okay, we agree. So uh but thank you guys for watching. This has been the Talk-Ons Week 11 College Football Playoff Bracket and Top 15. Hopefully we can get back together Thursday morning and get the prediction show done. The Week 11
previews
prediction
and
show
picks.
done. So, so hopefully we hope to see you guys there. So thank you for watching and Google
Dun,
me
dun, dun, dun,
Signetti signing off. Don't
dun,
forget,
dun, dun,
I
dun.
win.
Dun, 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 dun. This has also been Stinky Pits, your co-host.
EA Sports is in the game.
It's in the game.